Hello everyone, my name is Sarah, and I will begin by introducing what our team video will be covering today. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or Ceta, is more than just a trade deal between Canada and the European Union. It is a strategic economic partnership that actively lowers tariffs and opens vast new markets. And we know it works. Since its provisional application in 2017, the data has shown a clear increase in trade flows. So the question isn't if Ceta has an impact, but how it fundamentally strengthens our economy. Throughout this video, we will tackle that exact question, taking a pro-Ceta position and using core macroeconomic concepts to examine just how this agreement enhances the performance of the Canadian economy. I will start off by discussing Ceta's benefits for Canada in relation to the fundamental economic problem, scarcity. At its core, we know that our resources are limited compared to our unlimited wants, and for a large trading nation like Canada, this problem is a top priority. To keep up with demand, we must expand our production possibilities, and this is where Ceta comes in as an aid. As the data shows, the EU is not just another market, it's our second largest export destination and a vital growing partner. Ceta has actively diversified our trade away from an over-reliance on a single market, de-risking our economy. While our top exports are resource-based, Ceta allows us to leverage those resources to generate more wealth. And by securing stable, high-demand markets for our minerals and metals, we fuel the revenue and investment needed to develop and export higher-value consumer goods. Ceta directly addresses the economic problem of scarcity, and it allows Canada to more efficiently allocate its scarce resources to a larger, more diverse market. This means that it doesn't just move us along our existing production possibilities frontier. Instead, it actively expands it, thereby creating a larger, more resilient, and wealthier Canadian economy. Creating sustained economic growth is Canada's central economic priority. Injectors like consumption, government spending, and critically for Canada, net exports and business investment are key to seeing economic growth, and this is exactly where Ceta is a powerful tool to boost these core components of our GDP. Firstly, Ceta supercharges our small-medium enterprises, otherwise known as SMEs, which are the backbone of our private employment sector. By eliminating 98% of export tariffs, it directly boosts their profitability. And this isn't just a marginal gain, it's capital that is reinvested into innovation, expansion, and the creation of high-quality jobs, fueling growth from the ground up. Secondly, Ceta acts as a direct injector of foreign investment. The agreement's stability gives European firms the confidence to make long-term capital commitments in Canada, and this investment builds new facilities, funds new technologies, and permanently enhances our productive capacity. Ceta is a strategic economic tool that can be leveraged to create a powerful positive cycle where boosted exports and attracted investment work in tandem to deliver Canada to new economic heights. Now I will pass you off to Ayomide, who will be discussing Ceta in relation to the real economy.
Hi everyone, my name is Susan and I'll be talking on chapter 4, the real economic, based on output, employment, and inflation. Ceta saved Canadian stakeholders 890.6 million in duties in 2021. That's directly reducing cost of all trade. Post Ceta evaluation found the agreement increase in real wages in Canada by 0.1%. Follow on, I'll be talking about impact on unemployment and output. Firstly, GDP gap. The 65% trade growth boosts aggregate expenditure. This raises real GDP, shrinks the GDP gap, and moves Canada closer to potential output. Secondly, cyclical unemployment. Higher export demand leads to higher production and labor demand. This directly reduces cyclical unemployment, which is tied to the business cycle. Also, frictional unemployment. Ceta increased the number of European Union exporting firms by 11%. This creates more job opening and reduces the search time between jobs. Cost push inflation. The 890.6 million in tariff savings has lowered input costs for firms. This is a positive supply side shock that has put downward pressure on inflation. And lastly, real income. Ceta raises a real income in two ways. Firstly, it boosts nominal wages, that's 0.1 in gain, and it lowers the price of goods in tariffs.
Hi, I'm Connor. I will be doing aggregate demand and supply. So since CETA has come into force, our exports to the EU have increased by 16.6%, showing that increase in demand from the Europeans for Canadian goods. And then the number of provinces that are recording an increase in Canadian imports has increased to 9 out of 10 provinces. So that's also significant in that it shows a increase in the supply of goods here and the demand of Canadians as well. As we can see in this chart, it shows the growth year over year, and there's been steady growth since, aside from COVID. So yeah, after that we will move on to the aggregate expenditures. So for aggregate expenditures, we've seen a increase in European investment in Canada by about 19%, which is from 259 billion to over 300 billion. So that's been a significant boost to foreign spending in our economy. Canada's also seen Canadian businesses have also been investing more in Europe as well. The total trade value has increased by 25% since Ceta has been introduced. As we can see in this chart, investment into Canada among European nations that have ratified Ceta is significantly higher than those that have not. So as more nations ratify Ceta, we should expect this investment to grow even more. Thank you. It's off to Susan now.
Hello everyone, I am Sukhjeet and today I will be presenting the Canadian perspective on how Ceta support our economy. In this section, I will be focused on how Ceta impacts Canada's fiscal policy. Let's start with government revenue. Ceta helps increase government revenue in multiple ways. When Canadian exports grow, companies earn more, which leads to higher corporate tax collection. More trade also create more jobs in Canada, and that increases income tax revenue for the government. As the economy grows, Canadians will buy and sell more services and goods. Because of that, HST and GST revenue also increases. Higher business activity also boosts taxes related to investments, which further supports government finances. Now, the good thing about the extra revenue is that the government doesn't have to raise tax rates because the tax base increases, more company earning, more people working, the government can reduce without increasing taxes on Canadians. Overall, this creates stronger fiscal stability for Canada. A stable environment is very important because it supports long-term economic growth, attracts foreign investment, and gives the government room to invest in public services. So these are the key advantages CETA brings to Canada. Now moving on, let's look at how CETA helps diversify Canada's trade market and reduce government spendings. One of the biggest advantages of Ceta is that it helps Canada diversify away from relying heavily on the US market. The European Union is a large, high income market and access to gives Canadian businesses a more balanced and secure trade portfolio. Reduced government expenditure. Stronger and more consistent exports also helps the government spending needs. When exports remain high, the government doesn't need to spend much on programs, unemployment benefits, or emergency economic supports. This reduces the pressure on federal budget and creates more room for the long-term investments. With stable trade comes stable revenue. Overall, CETA not only expands Canada trade opportunities but also support long-term budget stability and reduce pressure on the government spending. Now moving on this slide about CETA and financial stability in Canada. Because of increased trade, Canadian dollar becomes stronger and people have more trust in our financial system. More economic activity means more moving money around, which keeps our financial climate stable and modern. CETA also helps Canadian banks. It makes it easier for them to operate in the European Union, improves cooperation on financial rules, and brings more European Union investment into Canadian banks. This one shows how SETA supports Canadian financial system and our banks. Now I will pass this to Ayurde for the next part.
Moving on, Chapter 9, the money market and monetary policy. Monetary policy consists of the management of the money supply and interest rate by a country's central bank. A pre-established calendar fully concluded at the beginning of 2024, whereby 98% of all tariff lines were eliminated, with the remaining 1 to 2% on sensitive products being phased out over several years. In 2014, the complete text of the agreement between Canada and the European Union was completed. In 2016, the agreement known as Ceta was signed. In 2017, Ceta was provisionally applied in September. First Ceta joint committee took place in Montreal in 2018, and for 2019, Ceta celebrated its second year. For 2020, the European and the Canada work plan was established, and while currently 2024, all tariff of products covered by Ceta was eliminated. Impact of monetary policy. Ceta enhances Canadian monetary policy effectiveness by fostering non-inflation growth and stabilizing the currency through strategic money diversification. Money demand. This says that Higher real GDP and trade volume shifts the transaction demand for money curves to the right. This has a direct and predictable impact on domestic interest rates. External value. Ceta has created strong, stable, and diversified demand for Canadian dollar from the European Union importers. This reduces our over-reliance on the US market and helps to stabilize the dollar external value. Non-inflation growth challenge. Bilateral trade in goods has grown over 65% between 2016 to 2023. This has increased the volume of our Canadian currency transaction. Canadian exports on the European Union hit 34 billion in 2024. That is 57% higher than the pre-CETA in 2015 levels.
Hi everyone, I'm Yoshprit Sohi and I will be covering Chapter 10 International Trade. In this, it says that CETA strongly improves Canada's international trade position. Firstly, Canada benefits from comparative advantage. We are competitive in agriculture, resources, high-tech manufacturing, and services, while the Europe specializes in machinery, pharmaceutical, and luxury goods. CETA helps both sides gain from their strengths. Secondly, CETA removes 98% of tariffs on goods traded between Canada and the Euro. This gives Canadian exporters access to the market worth over $500 million consumers. It also lowers cost and increases opportunity, especially from Canadian SMEs. Third, CETA also improves government procurement, giving Canadian companies access to European government contracts at all levels, valued at around $3.3 trillion annually. Now, moving forward to exchange rates, CETA also interacts with Canadian exchange rate. A weaker Canadian dollar makes our exports cheaper in the Europe and helping Canadian exporters and increases sales. A strong dollar, on the other hand, reduces competitiveness, but tariff removal under CETA helps offset this effect. Overall, CETA promotes exchange rate stability and creates confidence for long-term trade flow between Canada and Europe. Now let's keep it moving, and we are here at balance of payment. So balance of payment is an account about all the Canadian transactions from Canadian residents to the rest of the world. It includes two main accounts, that is current account and capital and financial account. Current account mainly involves economic transactions regarding goods, services and income flow. Since CETA is specifically designed to ramp up our exports into massive European market, we expect it to improve the current account balance, more exports, which means more money coming to Canada. For the second part, which is capital and financial account, it basically tracks investment. CETA is a huge win here because it includes clear rules on protecting and securing investment. This agreement makes Canada a much safer and more attractive place for European foreign direct investments. This influx of investment capital directly strengthens our financial account. So, the overall balance of payment effect is super positive by boosting both our exports and the flow of foreign direct investment. CETA ensures our national economy is both robust and deeply integrated into the global financial system. It's a win-win for our economic books.
Now, let's talk about recommendation, the implementation gap. High risk of failure for our Canadian small businesses. The rule of origin paperwork are just too complex, and 415 million in savings are being lost every year due to this gap. We recommend a launch of simplification and education program in order to bridge the usage gap for small businesses. We need to fix the problem of this deal. Secondly, push for full ratification. CETA is still not fully ratified. Over 10 EU member states are yet to approve the trade agreement. The deal main benefit is strategic diversification. However, this has not even been entirely achieved. Canada must make full ratification a top diplomatic priority to secure this economic edge against the US protections. And thirdly, management of public risk, providing a defense against right to regulation for public health and the environment. To minimize the barrier like threat of a lawsuit stopping goods public policy, like using good standard reform. In conclusion, I'm here showing that CETA really does what it promises on paper. It has helped Canada shift some of its trade away from an over-reliance on the US market. Since CETA, Canada bilateral trade with the European Union has grown by about 46%. That's much faster than our overall trade. But that success is not shared equally. Some large Canadian exporters with strong legal and logistic teams and the European Union pharmaceutical companies capture most of these gains, especially through stronger patent protection. But meanwhile, Canada consumers and public health budgets are expected to face about a 6 to 13% rise in drug costs, which pressures Canada's healthcare system. So CETA supports long-term economic resilience by locking in European Union market access, but is also raising important question about who benefits and who pays the price.